Senator Ludlam.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I might carry on in that vein because it's a really interesting line of questioning. When did ANSTO or your predecessor organisation begin the development of Synroc?
The Synroc technology was developed in the early 80s. It went through a number of stages of development within in ANSTO, which I would call mainly of a demonstration of unit operations and core technologies. That continued really until 2009, when we decided to see whether the economics was real or not. And it was when we did those techno-economic studies at the time that we found that it was really attractive relative to the other waste solutions.
Right. So 30 years or more, a little over 30 years in total.
I think that's I think a good calculation.
Okay. What's the present per kilogram cost of isolating is the wrong word, I guess, but encapsulating liquid reprocessing waste in Synroc?
I'm unsure as to whether you're talking about kilograms of Synroc or kilograms of waste.
Of waste, irrespective of how many kilos of Synroc that generates.
Yeah, I'll take that on notice in terms of how we characterise the waste in terms of kilograms, because we don't really think of it in terms of kilograms, but rather activity.
I'm happy to take your metrics. Per activity metric.
So the per activity metric is the comparison between cemented waste and Synroc. And the volume reduction is from about 3,000 litres of liquid down to 500 litres of Synroc pre-final packaging. And that compares with an increase in volume with the cemented waste.
Yeah. But you measure Synroc in litres before you calcine it and solidify it into blocks. You're not producing a liquid material, are you?
No. You start with a liquid material, and it finally is it's compressed into a mineral form. Just for clarity, the Synroc technology, Synroc stands for synthetic rock, and it's really the breakthrough that Ted Ringwood made is to find these very, very ancient rocks in which the radionuclides don't diffuse very far. And so the synthetic rock mineral formulations, which he developed and were subsequently developed all over the world, are essentially have the character that they would contain that waste in a very efficient way.
Does it mean it's not water soluble?
Absolutely.
Won't wash out?
It's resilient because it's based on ancient rocks which have demonstrated their ability to maintain their character over long periods of time.
Can you provide us, I'm a little bit perplexed as to why you couldn't provide us with a unit cost of encapsulation at the moment.
Well, as you'd be aware, with a first-of-a-kind plant, part of the questions we're asking is the final cost will be determined by the plant economics, and since that has never been demonstrated, part of the role of the plant is to establish that engineering baseline.
Does it bug you a bit that we've been at this for 30 years and you can't give us a unit cost estimate of what it's actually going to be worth?
I think it's actually quite exciting because the work that has gone into the chemistry and to the mineralogy and to the qualification of these different range of options that we have with Synroc has kept us in the forefront of nuclear waste discussions. In fact, recent monographs that have been put together around nuclear waste opportunities, for instance, in the United States in the last 3 years, continue to advance Synroc as one of the most attractive opportunities that has not yet been properly explored.
Yeah. So the material that's coming back, so did I just, before I move on, understand that you've taken on notice to provide us with some cost estimates at various economies of scale, if you like?
Yeah, I think a scale is the correct way to approach it.
Okay. So for what it costs at the moment at the kind of pilot scale and what you anticipate it would cost at a commercial scale?
Well, this is not a pilot scale. This is a scale that would deal with our intermediate level liquid waste. So that's why I say it's a commercial scale plant, because it's not scaled to be a pilot plant. Certainly if we were doing something like an intractable waste in, say, parts of the United States, it would look like a pilot scale plant because the volumes are quite small.
I understand.
But it's a fully, if another nuclear medicine provider wanted such a plant, they would be looking at a full scale plant.
All right, just whatever you can provide us by way of estimates. How would you characterise Synroc, assuming it can be made to work at a commercial scale and not be prohibitively expensive? The reprocessed material that's coming back from Europe at the end of this year or early next year to be positioned temporarily at the new Lucas Heights facility that I want to ask about in a moment, and eventually maybe somewhere else. How is that any different from material that was encased in Synroc, and are we getting some kind of second best product compared to what you think you can put on the market if you get to scale?
So the best solutions for the type of waste that is returning to Australia now is in fact the one that we have as a solution, which is vitrified waste. That is, it's encapsulated in a glass form. The difference between a glass form and a Synroc product is probably the long-term resilience of the Synroc waste is going to be higher, but the vitrified wastes are already qualified from a safety case point of view for the requirements that have been established by regulators around the world.
But is Synroc going to be a more resilient product?
One of the advantages, I think, of Synroc is that we likely, as we develop the technology, and I don't want to over-anticipate this, we might well be able to get higher waste loadings than is the case with currently vitrified products.
What do you mean, more waste into
more waste
per
kilogram of the material? But as I say, Synroc is now entering what I'd call the real engineering phase and the full demonstration with radiological materials. This has been done on a small scale around the world, but this is the first time it's been done at full scale. So it would be wrong of me to over-anticipate all of the outcomes. So I'm sketching a scenario rather than an economic assessment.
Yeah, understand. And you've undertaken to provide us with some estimates on cost. So now I'm turning to in what ways, apart from anticipated potential greater density of radioisotopes per kilogram, in what other ways is Synroc superior to the vitrified form in which the waste is coming back to Australia?
So over the long term, the diffusion lengths of those materials in a Synroc material will be shorter over time than for the vitrified material.
Just spell that out for the layperson.
So if I'm a radio...
Firstly, what do you mean by longer term?
Okay, so the longer term is what we're talking about here is a waste solution that potentially could be available for the full requirement for an intermediate level product.
Tens of thousands of years?
Which would be tens of thousands of years because they're based on rocks that are millions of years old. So.
And when you say diffusion pathway, you mean...
So let's assume I'm a radioisotope and I'm in a rock or I'm in a glass. What I'm saying is that if you're in a rock, you're going to go less far than if you're in the glass because the glass has got more places that you can move through.
It's still going to leak out of the material, but it's going to take a lot longer to leak.
Well, I think leak out is an overstatement. I mean, the diffusion lengths over billions of years in some of these rocks are shorter than a metre. So, that's a really short length over that period of time.
So why would we dump a bunch of vitrified glass bricks out in the outback if you believe that ANSTO might be onto a commercial scale solution that would trap it more effectively over those long periods of time?
I think there's a fair bit of commentary in there. I think Dr. Patterson can answer some sensible questions.
Yeah, it's been quite a useful conversation. What is this intervention about?
Well, it's not a chat room. It's not a chat room. We've got some deadlines. I'm not looking to cut you off.
We were doing reasonably well until the Minister intervened.
No,
but what that was about.
But Senator Ludlam, as I say, we're doing quite well.
Yeah.
But I am up against some time constraints.
I'm trying to move us briskly along.
So don't get into a sort of
maybe if
a chat. Just keep it to the question.
If you could just call the Minister to order. We're doing quite well.
I don't need to.
Ask some questions that Dr. Patterson can answer, and then I think we'll all...
Senator
I can rephrase it.
A lot of enlightenment for you today.
I'm happy to rephrase it, and we'll see if we can move this along.
Let's do that.
If ANSTO is working on a solution that you believe is superior to vitrified glass, do you think, or for what purpose would we be proceeding with a remote waste facility for a product that you believe is inferior to Synroc?
I think superior, inferior is the wrong discourse. It's whether it's fit for purpose and meets the safety requirements. I believe that the vitrified solution, which is coming back from France and from the UK, is the best-in-class fit-for-purpose solution that is available today, which is when we have the obligation to take the waste back. So I wouldn't characterise it in any way as superior or inferior.
I understand we have an obligation to take it back. I think taking it back is probably the least worst option. We don't presently have an obligation to dump it at a remote site, though, do we? We could hold on to it for a period of time while you develop or bring up to
is this not matters
scale.
for government? Is there not a tender
Sounds
process?
like
Well,
a
these are-
policy matter rather
Yeah.
Okay, you can dodge it that way if
Well,
you wish.
well, no, that's not fair. That's not fair. This is ANSTO. They're here. You know what their charter is. Their charter is certainly not in the areas that you're talking about.
Okay, I'll just come back to some budget line items and then I'll finish up. If you could just provide us with an update, I know you touched on this earlier, so there's $22.3 million for radioactive waste storage outlined in the budget. How much of that is accruing to the site that you're putting together at ANSTO as opposed to forward planning for a remote site or some other solution?
So the funding contained in the current budget has got two elements. The one is the repatriation of waste from the UK. That is not going to create any new facilities at ANSTO, but is intended in the best of all possible worlds to go directly to a national waste repository. That would be the best outcome. And so depending on when the national waste repository and store is completed, there are plausible scenarios within which the UK waste return might go there directly without having to come to an interim store at ANSTO. The second part, the $22.3 million over 3 years, is for interim radioactive waste storage, and that is to ensure that we are able to store the waste that is currently on the site and that is being generated in our current operations is adequately handled until the national waste store and repository are ready for use.
Could you just clarify for us, because it's different to how I understood the Commonwealth was proceeding? There's a national site selection process underway that Minister McFarlane has carriage of, and I think we'll take that on tomorrow morning from memory. So I won't ask you to speak in too much detail to that. But that's not meant to conclude with site selection until the middle of next year, and then licensing, approvals, construction and operation would take another year or more after that. Are you saying, so that's pushing us well into 2016 or 2017, if it runs according to the Minister's timetable. But are you suggesting that waste from the UK could go straight there? Because that would imply delaying its return.
Look, I think I might get the Secretary to advise you what the process is, so
As you wish.
that we're clear.
Yeah, just because
about
this is
that.
different. This is different to what's been described us in the past.
Well,
My
let's-
understanding has been that the material from Europe was coming to be temporarily stored at Lucas Heights and then transferred. So yeah, go ahead.
So the French waste return is due to come back to Australia in the latter part of this year, and that will go to an interim store which has received an operating licence from the regulator
It has already. Okay.
and which is ready to receive that waste. The regulator has not authorised at this point the return of UK denominated waste to that interim store. It is certainly ANSTO's preference that if the timing could be propitious, that we would return the UK waste directly to a national radioactive waste store.
Do we have any contractual obligations in terms of timing, like we did with the French material?
We have a series of obligations with the UK and some negotiating positions. There is considerable flexibility at this point.
Okay, so you're actually decoupling the return of the French material later this year from the material that I think originated from Dunray or Sellafield originally. When's the latest that we can bring it back?
I think your summary is correct, and I don't have a latest date because there might be negotiations that could change those dates.
Will that cost us money? Understood we could have renegotiated the French material, but it was likely to have a cost implication.
All of the implications of the UK actions that we have taken have reduced the cost to Australia.
Sorry, say again?
They have reduced the cost to Australia.
But would negotiating for an extension of time before repatriation cost money?
We would always seek to look at the costs from the perspective of a responsible approach to the waste and the appropriate minimisation of costs.
Just finally from me, are there any plans for community consultation regarding the new facility which you've said has received its licences for receiving the French waste at least? Could you just tell us what consultation there's been regarding operation of that facility and transport to and from that facility, at least in the immediate environment in Sutherland Shire?
There's been ongoing consultation with all of the stakeholders. ARPANSA has also conducted two request for public engagement and consultation.
Okay.
And so I think the consultation has been extensive, and we'll continue to consult with all of the stakeholders.
Thank you. I'll finish up. If you could maybe provide for us on notice just details of what occurred and some sample copies of the materials that were distributed at those meetings, and appreciate that those have been done. I'm sure they were valuable for residents. And just finally, has ANSTO changed any security arrangements following the September 14 security incident where a number of... Oh, sorry.
The material might have been distributed by them, but not by others, clearly.
Yeah, that's fine. By material either by ANSTO or I guess ARPANSA if you've got copies.
We will consult with our Panzer, and if they're happy for us to submit it, we'll do
I'm
that.
presuming if it was distributed at a public meeting, it's not going to be top secret.
I think the difficulty would be that I don't want to act on behalf of the regulator, because that,
That's okay. I understand. Just finally, just on security, and again on notice if you would prefer, or I could take this to the AFP, I guess. Have there been any changes to site security following that incident in September of last year where a number of men were intercepted by police on site?
There have been some changes to the security arrangements on site. What we have done is that the previous safety supervisory function, which was called SOS, has been replaced with an outsourced function.
Since that event, you've outsourced an element of your security?
Correct. So our site control room has now got a different set of management arrangements. I think it's important to be very, very clear that the incident that you referred to was not on the ANSTO site. It was off the ANSTO site, and there was at no time any suggestion that there was an attempt to enter the ANSTO site.
Yeah, I understand that. Just on notice, if there's any further details you'd like to provide, particularly about the subcontracting arrangements. I'll leave it there. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks very much, Senator.